Destruction doesn't always look like an explosion. It doesn't need shouting, blood, or a public spectacle. Sometimes the most lethal thing you can do to someone is invisible, slow, deliberate, and surgical. That's what Machiavelli taught, not to smash your enemies with force, but to let them crumble on their own, to watch them unravel while you remain unbothered. Here's the core idea. You don't beat someone by matching their energy. You beat them by refusing the match. People who try to take you down are counting on you to play the game they want. Loud, visible, reactive. The instant you react, you enter their arena. Reaction is the ticket they need. So the Machiavellian move is to withdraw that ticket. Stay still. Let them do the work. When someone insults you, most people reflexively retaliate. They answer with words, emotion, explanation. They try to prove themselves. Machiavelli's answer was different. Don't engage. Maintain stillness, but don't confuse stillness with passivity. Stillness is a deliberate posture. It's dominance disguised as calm. It confuses the attacker because they expected noise. They expect heat. They want to point and say, "See? Look how unstable they are." When they don't get that, their performance begins to wobble. Think about it. The more someone talks to prove themselves, the worse they look. Explanation becomes confession. The louder they pipe up, the more hollow their position appears. They try to manufacture power with words, and the moment you refuse to validate those words, their whole position deflates. Perception is everything. Machiavelli weaponized that. He didn't have to out-argue his detractors. He let them argue themselves into ruin. Here's how you do it in practice. Someone insults or humiliates you in a room full of people. Don't flinch. Don't snap back. Don't even blink dramatically. Pause. Look at them calmly. Not with anger. Not with shock. Just observe. Let silence expand. Let them feel it. Then pivot. Change the subject. Talk to someone else. Carry on as if nothing happened. That simple move reframes the entire situation. They expected a fight. You gave them a non-event. What does that signal? You are not worth the disruption. The crowd feels it even if they can't name it. Something in the room shifts. You didn't escalate and you didn't fold. You own the silence. And silence is suffocating for the provocateur. They're left speaking into vacuum. And the more air they try to gulp, the more ridiculous they sound. They look unstable, desperate, performative. Everything they wanted to avoid being. Most attacks aren't about defeating you. They're about controlling the narrative. People want you to look weak so their story about you sticks. If you refuse to provide the emotional fuel, their narrative collapses into noise. Let them speak. Let them rant. Their words will echo back on them because there's no friction. No one is there to fan the flames. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, you start doing the actual damage. You withdraw access, information, inclusion. You subtract yourself quietly. No dramatic announcement, no public expose. You simply stop opening doors, stop sharing projects, stop inviting them into conversations that matter. Remove your energy and approval. What's left is someone spinning without an audience. They panic. They try louder provocations. They amplify their attacks. The louder they get, the more foolish they look, because you aren't even playing the same game anymore. That's the point. Let them expose themselves. This is a war of image more than it is a war of blows. In public perception, whoever looks least composed loses the long game, even if they win a small skirmish. You don't need to fight. You need to create contrast. Stay composed. Speak slowly. Let them stutter. When they obsess over you, you become the measure of their insignificance. People start to notice not because you shouted louder, but because you didn't shout at all. There's a second layer to this strategy. weaponize their hunger for attention. Enemies and provocateurs crave reactions because they're starving for validation. Every disrespect, every slander, is a bid for oxygen, for attention. So deny them that oxygen. Don't mention them. Never speak ill of them. Not because you're being honorable, because you're being strategic. Each time they talk about you and you stay silent, their voice becomes an echo. People wonder why they keep bringing you up, why they seem fixated. Doubt creeps in, and doubt eats credibility. You don't have to counter every rumor or whisper. In fact, the more you defend, the more you validate the rumor's existence. Instead, perform in public. Be visible through actions, not explanations. Speak clearly in meetings. Make bold, intelligent moves. Show consistency and composure. When observers compare what they hear with what they see, the mismatch will expose the liar. You don't call them out. Reality does the calling. And when attacks move from public spectacle to behind-the-scenes sabotage, whispers, insinuations, private slanders, the response is the same but subtler. Don't try to correct every story. Elevate your presence. Make your competence obvious in front of the people who matter. Let your results undermine the rumor. When your presence contradicts what's being said about you, the storyteller's credibility collapses. They set their own trap by assuming your silence meant guilt. Instead, your silence was a setup. This approach works against imitators too. When someone copies your moves, many people panic. They think they're being challenged. Machiavelli would see it differently. Imitation is flattery that admits your blueprint is superior. Don't attack the imitator. Accelerate. Shift the terrain so quickly they're always one step behind. Evolve your work, diversify your influence, raise your standard. By the time they've copied one iteration of you, you've already become another version. They chase echoes while you create new music. Finally, there are the proud. Those who look down on you and assume they're untouchable. These are the easiest to break without violence. You don't topple their throne. You build a better one beside it. Outclass them quietly. When people start shifting attention your way, their applause fades. Pride can't survive being outclassed. Their collapse is internal and inevitable. And again, you didn't shout. You simply made them irrelevant by being better, steadier, and more useful. Now, let's go deeper. How to handle the slow, quiet erosion. These are the people who won't shout. They whisper. They plant doubt in private. They smile at your face and pull the rug with offhand comments behind closed doors. This kind of sabotage is corrosive because it moves through networks, relationships, and reputations step by step. Most people react by trying to fix every broken tile. They explain, they justify, they overcommunicate. That's the trap. Machiavelli's answer: don't validate the whisper by addressing it directly. Silence doesn't mean you're hiding something. It's a strategy. Instead, you become more visible in the right places. You don't counter the rumor with words, you counter it with presence. Show up where decisions are being made. Do your work in front of witnesses who matter. Make your competence impossible to doubt because people who see you perform will naturally compare you to the private stories being told. When whispers try to frame your success as luck, fraud, or manipulation, respond by being consistently excellent. When they suggest your motives are selfish, demonstrate generosity of effort and clarity of purpose. When they attempt to paint you as emotionally unstable, become the calm in the room. This isn't moral posturing, it's strategic optics. You're changing the input that others use to judge you. The rumor lives on perception. Perception changes when the data changes. Another powerful tactic is to quietly surround yourself with people who can vouch for your work without needing your endorsement. Build relationships that create implicit references. If you've got allies who've watched you over time, they will naturally contradict whispered stories because their first-hand experience doesn't match the lie. That's the quiet reversal. You don't attack the liar. You stack the room with reality. Now, what about those who try to steal your space by mirroring you? Copycats are a weird kind of compliment. They admit your template works, but they also threaten to dilute your voice if you let them. The Machiavellian playbook says, don't poke the copycat. Transcend them. Accelerate your evolution. Change your shape frequently. Make your public moves one step ahead of imitation. If they copy last month, you've already moved 3 months forward. Their imitation becomes evidence that they are always behind you. Your unpredictability becomes a weapon. You must make it difficult for imitators to find an anchor. Release new ideas, shift your visual language, diversify your platform, or expand into areas they haven't thought of yet. Do it subtly and consistently. When imitation becomes a pattern, you're not threatened, you're instructive. The goal is to make imitation feel futile. If you are always learning, always shifting, then by the time they catch up, you'll have left the landscape they were trying to occupy. Let's talk about the elite who assume they're untouchable, those who look down on you. Pride is a delicate thing. It craves affirmation and collapses under quiet competence. You don't need to demolish their reputation publicly. You simply need to be better at the things that actually matter to people who allocate power. Results, calm presence, and the ability to create value. Build your own arena. Raise standards where you move. When the crowd starts to notice the difference, the proud person's applause will thin out. There's a more subtle psychological move here. Be indifferent in your language about them. When others bring up the proud person, speak of them as someone you respect historically, but don't elevate them in current terms. Comments like, "I haven't spoken with them in a while," or "they had their moment," are small strokes that reframe the narrative without engaging. The proud one then feels the slow leak of relevance. They were banking on attention. You deny it by making them irrelevant. At the same time, use contrast as your tool. Presence plus indifference is a kind of social math. If you're consistently composed and productive, and if they are loud or brittle, observers will do the subtraction mentally. Competence minus spectacle equals credibility. The social brain loves pattern. When someone's pattern is inconsistency and yours is steadiness, people will start preferring the latter. You haven't said a word about them. The comparison does the work. There is another crueler truth. Sometimes the best defense is not just to ignore, but to exit. Walk away. Leave the field you are playing on. When someone is defined by their relationship to you, leaving can be lethal. If their identity is built around opposing you, their center collapses when you're no longer in orbit. Don't confuse leaving with defeat. It's strategic displacement. You remove the oxygen in which their obsession lived. Now they must either recenter themselves or implode trying. But leaving requires preparation. You don't just vanish. You create a new center of gravity. Move into rooms where the old antagonist doesn't exist. Align with people who will elevate your narrative. Make moves that are so strategically forward that anyone still focused on you seems petty. This is the kind of victory that looks like growth rather than retaliation. It's quiet, and that's its power. There's also a decentralized form of destruction you can use: subtraction of access. Not ostracism as public shaming, but a quiet withdrawal of the privileges you used to grant. Stop sharing information. Stop inviting them to the board. Stop recommending them. Doors you once held open close without ceremony. The damage here is infrastructural. Relationships atrophy, networks reorient, and opportunities stop flowing to the target. They may not understand why it's happening until it's too late. All of this relies on a steady, internal architecture, emotional discipline, strategic patience, and a refusal to be baited. If you let emotion dictate, you'll validate every rumor, every attack. If you act out of spite, you hand them the narrative. The Machiavellian ideal in these circumstances is almost monk-like, detached, focused, ruthless in clarity, but gentle in presentation. Your actions are measured, not chaotic. They are built to convince without argument. Finally, remember how powerful invisibility can be when used as a lever. The absence of attention is often more damning than noise. When someone's name fades from conversation, when doors stop opening and invitations stop arriving, their social capital drains. That's the endpoint you engineer. Not an explosion, but an evaporation. They're left with memories of a conflict that no one else remembers. You, meanwhile, have moved on to spheres where their reach cannot follow. Now we get to the craft. How to manufacture contrast deliberately. This is where strategy becomes art. If you want other people to draw the conclusion you need, that your attacker is unstable, irrelevant, or depleted, you must control the signals they use to judge you. Humans are pattern machines. We look for shortcuts. You can design those shortcuts. First, control your cadence of visibility. Don't be constantly present. Be present meaningfully. There's a rhythm to influence. Bursts of high-value visibility followed by deliberate disappearance. Show up when it matters. In meetings that shape decisions, in conversations where reputations are formed, in events where leaders gather. When you appear, make it count. Deliver something concrete, a decision, a result, a provocative insight. Then withdraw. The contrast between presence and absence creates a psychological weight to your appearances. People remember the moments you owned, and they begin to measure others against them. Second, curate your optics. This sounds petty, but optics are the shorthand people use to interpret character. Dress with intention. Body language is a language. Speak slowly and precisely. Cultivate a calm posture that suggests you're someone who's not hurried, not desperate, not reactive. Small rituals matter. Arrive early, sit centered, maintain eye contact, smile minimally, and leave before applause dies. These signals feed a frame, composed, competent, deliberately distant. When someone else screams for attention, the audience compares a frantic posture to your controlled one and draws conclusions without needing an argument. Third, perform consistency publicly. Rumors live in gaps. If you're erratic, your inconsistencies will be used against you, so make your results and behavior consistent. If you promise clarity, deliver clarity. If you claim competence, show up with proof. When people can predict your behavior, that you'll be calm, that you'll deliver, the contrast with a chaotic accuser becomes obvious. Consistency is a form of credibility armor. It's slow, boring, and decisive. Fourth, deploy selective transparency. You don't have to answer every question, but you can create selective windows that expose your process without validating false narratives. Publish the results of your work. Share case studies. Let stakeholders see the mechanics of what you do. When you publish transparent evidence of competence, rumors about incompetence or manipulation lose traction because the audience has direct access to the facts. This isn't defensive broadcasting. It's narrative architecture. The more you control what people can check for themselves, the less room whispers have to grow. Fifth, use allies as vectors of credibility. Reputation is social. One person praising you is a testimonial. A network of people who echo your performance is a verdict. But don't manufacture these endorsements. Build relationships rooted in real value exchange. Do favors without asking for public return. Help people when there's no camera. Over time, those genuine relationships will turn into quiet references that contradict any false story. When rumors come from a single voice, your network's lived experience becomes more persuasive than any rebuttal. Sixth, time your responses like a grandmaster times a move. Not every moment requires action. Often the best response to provocation is to do nothing. But sometimes you need to punctuate the silence with a move so precise, it reframes everything. That could be a major product launch, a hard result in a public forum, or an unanticipated alliance. The key is that these punctuations should be disproportionate to the noise they answer. When you respond with gravity rather than volume, it's perceived as evidence that the noise was never worth your attention. Seventh, master the language of indifference. Indifference is not cruelty. It is the thin steel of superiority. When asked about an attacker, practice small, dismissive phrases. I don't follow that. That's not on my radar. I'm focused on building. These lines are short, unemotional, and reframe the subject as unimportant. Delivered with genuine indifference, they function like a social veto. People notice the speaker's lack of concern and usually align with it. Indifference spreads. Eighth, channel your energy into asymmetrical work. While your attacker is using repetitive tactics to get attention, you're building depth that can't be faked quickly. Proprietary knowledge, unique results, exclusive partnerships. This is the long game, and it's devastating. When someone reveals themselves as a flash while you are an archive of competence, observers will inevitably privilege depth over noise. Depth is boring to create and thrilling to witness. It's also nearly impossible to undermine with rumors. Ninth, prepare for comeback attempts with a stoic ledger. Keep a running record, not for revenge, but for clarity. Document interactions, decisions, and evidence of your performance. If the attacker escalates and you must demonstrate facts, the ledger allows you to produce clarity without drama. When you show proof calmly, people read it as evidence, not as ammunition. This preparation prevents reactive narrative repair that looks defensive. 10th, shape your disappearance to read like a verdict. The goal of silence is not merely withholding, it's making absence meaningful. When you exit a circle, you don't need a press release. You need a pattern. Stop attending certain events. Stop replying to certain threads. Stop participating in rituals that used to define your shared culture. Don't explain. Let the absence be noticed. Over time, absence accumulates into a clear signal. The relationship or relevance is over. Others will fill that gap with their own interpretations, and most will assume it wasn't you who failed, but them who lost access. 11th, control narrative inflection points. A rumor becomes a story when someone frames it at scale. Identify the moments when narratives shift. Shareholder meetings, team all hands, industry gatherings, and control your presence there. If you can place a single incontrovertible fact in those inflection points, you shape the story arc. It's not about loud rebuttals, it's about setting seeds of truth where people go to form judgments. Finally, maintain moral clarity for your team and close circle. You might be operating ruthlessly by design, but your people need rules. Define norms for how your circle responds to attacks. Are they to ignore, to document, to elevate? Consistent squad behavior reinforces the public frame you want. If your allies behave predictably, calm, composed, focused, they model the very state you're asking others to see. Your network's demeanor becomes an extension of your strategy. When you combine cadence, optics, consistency, selective transparency, ally curation, timed punctuations, indifference, asymmetrical work, documentation, meaningful absence, narrative control, and team discipline, you create a machine. It's a machine that turns attacks into evidence against the attacker and makes your absence function like judgment. This is how you manufacture contrast on purpose. This is how you make the social world do the dismantling for you. There are edge cases where the quiet strategies we've talked about need to be adapted. Not every attack happens in a boardroom or on social media. Sometimes the stakes are legal, sometimes physical. Sometimes the public sphere is so loud that silence alone won't register. The Machiavellian playbook still applies, but with guardrails and conditional moves. Here's how to handle those dangerous, noisy, or legally fraught situations, and how to do it without losing your moral compass or stepping into illegal territory. First, legal pressure. When someone threatens you with litigation, contracts, or orchestrated complaints, silence isn't enough. The stakes now require documented defense and a calibrated public posture. But even here, you keep the basic principle. Respond with structure and evidence, not with rage or melodrama. Assemble facts. Get counsel. Keep communication precise and limited. Let your legal response be procedural, not performative. A carefully worded cease and desist or an attorney's letter reframes the story into processed terms. We're handling this through appropriate channels, which, again, removes the emotional oxygen the attacker craves. Document everything immediately. Dates, messages, witnesses, contracts, and any record of the instigation. This isn't paranoia. It's practical preparation. When the attacker is counting on drama, a quiet, methodical legal posture turns their noise into paperwork. It's also a public signal. People respect someone who uses the system rather than spectacle. But be mindful. Legal fights can be expensive and reputationally messy. Often, the right Machiavellian decision is not to litigate, but to neutralize the threat through containment. Get legal counsel to advise on a targeted, proportional response that kills the immediate risk without creating a new narrative of conflict. Second, threats of violence. If the attack escalates toward physical harm, you don't negotiate philosophically, you prioritize safety. Report threats to the appropriate authorities. Secure your environment. Reduce unnecessary exposure. Use security measures that are discreet. Trusted partners, vetted venues, controlled travel plans. Silence here is replaced by precaution. This is not weakness, it's strategy. The goal is to deprive violent actors of easy access and public attention. Keep your response professional and factual. When violence is threatened, the right Machiavellian move is to make the threat impotent and the attacker traceable. Third, an oversaturated public sphere. Sometimes you face mass noise, a smear campaign that moves faster than you can address. In those cases, silence can feel like drowning. The strategic alternative is amplification by subtraction. Pick the precise channel where the relevant audience gathers and own it. If your attacker is trending on a single platform, don't try to fight on every feed. Instead, show up where the decision makers and peers are. Industry publications, key conferences, respected forums, and do work that can't be dismissed. Publish a case study, reveal hard metrics, or run a high-visibility pilot that produces objective results. When the rumor machine is loud, targeted signals of truth are louder to the people whose opinion matters. Fourth, when the attacker weaponizes the law, the press, or institutions to ruin you, a coordinated campaign, use institutional leverage back. Call your stakeholders, but do it disciplinedly. You don't need a public spectacle to mobilize allies. Prepare a concise, factual brief for investors, partners, or regulators that explains the situation and your actions. A professional calm briefing does two things. It neutralizes panic and it signals that you are organized, accountable, and above manipulation. Institutions don't respond to drama. They respond to documentation and governance. Fifth, the ethical boundary. All of these moves are tactical, but there's a line you mustn't cross. You can't weaponize information unlawfully, threaten retaliation, or create false evidence. The most durable form of Machiavellian power is legitimacy. If you sacrifice ethics for a short-term dismantling, you may win a battle but lose the war. Operate with proportionality. If you withdraw access, do so because of objective reasons. Performance, trust, alignment. If you document, document truthfully. If you expose, expose responsibly. The goal is not to become the kind of person who would poison a well. It's to be the kind of person whose absence is a verdict. Sixth, managing public perception during legal or violent escalations. Even when you must take firm action, practice restraint in public communication. Use neutral language. Example: we are taking appropriate steps to address this matter. Avoid emotional language. Avoid personal attacks, and never feed the narrative that your opponent wants. Remember that opposing sides often try to create binary stories, victim and villain, that attract attention. Your job is to refuse the binary, provide facts, and keep your circle stable. Calm institutions and calm teams create trust. Trust resists manipulation. Seventh, when you must speak, shape the narrative with precision. If you need to issue a statement because silence would be misinterpreted as guilt, make every word do work. State facts, reference evidence, and outline next steps. Don't narrate motives. Don't speculate. Give people a framework to evaluate evidence themselves. A short, clear, impeccably documented statement is far more effective than a long emotional defense. It reframes the discourse into a checklist rather than a soap opera. Eighth, protect your team and community. Attacks rarely target only one person. They aim to destabilize networks. So be proactive. Brief your core team privately. Set guidelines for external communication, and ensure your people understand the strategy. When the inner circle moves predictably, silent on public feeds, factual in private briefings, it prevents ad hoc responses that become liabilities. The group's composure becomes a public asset. It reinforces the frame of steadiness you've built. Ninth, consider strategic alliances. If the field is toxic or the opponent has institutional backing, look for partners who have the leverage or reputational capital to counterbalance the threat. Alliances can be formal joint ventures, endorsements or informal shared forums, cross-support in industry groups. Allies don't fight your personal war. They expand your circle so the attacker's impact dilutes. Align with entities that raise the floor of credibility around you. 10th, know when to end. The final edge case move is termination. Decide when the battle costs more than the gains of winning it. This is a hard calculation that combines risk, attention, resource allocation, and long-term trajectory. The Machiavellian master is not addicted to conflict. If the fight threatens your mission, assets, or sanity, withdraw public presence in that arena and redirect resources to building elsewhere. Exiting is not defeat. It is strategic reprioritization. All of these contingencies point to a central truth. Control the frame, control the facts, and always choose proportionality. When stakes spike legal, physical, or institutional, Escalate your response in structure, not in noise. Use documentation, counsel, and networks. Protect people, preserve reputation, and never let the attack pull you into moral or legal compromises. At this stage, the tactics don't matter unless you become them. Destruction without attack isn't just a strategy, it's a way of living. The people who master this don't perform power, they radiate it. Every look, every pause, every absence communicates strength. You can't fake that. You build it through discipline, through silence, through emotional control, so deep that even your enemies can't find where to hit. Let's start with the foundation: emotional neutrality. Every provocation, every insult, every rumor has one goal: to make you react. The moment you react, you step into their frame. You've turned yourself into their puppet. That's why emotional neutrality is the ultimate defense. You feel everything, but you act on nothing impulsively. When anger rises, breathe. When humiliation hits, observe it like a scientist, not a victim. You'll realize emotion is just data. It tells you where your ego still wants control. The more you can delay reaction, the more untouchable you become. The strong respond after clarity. The weak respond after pain. Then comes the weapon of silence. Silence is not passivity. It's precision. It makes people question themselves. It creates an empty space they desperately try to fill with their own insecurity. Every word you don't say carries more weight than the ones you do. Silence confuses the arrogant and weakens the loud. It makes people realize that they're performing for an audience that stopped watching. When someone attacks you, resist the urge to explain. Let them talk into the void. The silence will wrap around them until it becomes unbearable. And when they finally stumble over their own words, the room will remember your stillness more than their noise. Next is control of visibility. Powerful people don't chase attention, they ration it. They know that the more others see of you, the easier you are to read. And predictability kills power. Appear intentionally. Speak only when it serves purpose. Leave before applause ends. Mystery multiplies influence. When people know less about your moves, they imagine more about your depth. Appear rarely but decisively, and your presence will always feel larger than life. Absence, when strategic, speaks louder than exposure. Now, treat your reputation as a fortress, not a billboard. Every time you react emotionally in public, you open a gate for attack. Every calm, consistent action adds a brick to your fortress. Build it slowly, quietly, through results, competence, and discipline. Reputation doesn't come from defending yourself. It comes from making defense unnecessary. When people see you deliver again and again, lies lose oxygen. You don't correct stories, you outlive them. The more consistent your pattern, the more fragile gossip becomes. Then, embrace detachment. Attachment is dependence. It ties your peace to the approval of others. Detachment, on the other hand, is freedom. You stop caring who claps, who doubts, who talks. You focus on movement, not noise. Detachment doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It gives you patience. It allows you to wait without fear, act without desperation, and walk away without bitterness. You don't fight to prove, you act to progress. The less you need validation, the harder it is to manipulate you. From detachment comes composure, the outer face of inner control. Composure isn't pretending to be calm. It's training your body to obey your mind. When tension rises, slow your breath. Lower your tone. Hold eye contact a second longer than expected. These small cues create psychological gravity. People instinctively trust the one who looks least disturbed. In crisis, your calm becomes leadership. In confrontation, your stillness becomes intimidation. The one who stays centered sets the rhythm for everyone else. Next, learn frame control. Every interaction is a battle for dominance of perception. Who defines what's happening? The attacker wants you to enter their frame. Defensive, emotional, inferior. Refuse. Keep your own frame so stable that theirs collapses. If someone mocks you, smile as if they've complimented you. If they interrupt, pause, then continue without acknowledging it. You don't fight their narrative. You rewrite the atmosphere. The one who controls tone controls reality. And when you control the emotional temperature, everyone else unconsciously adjusts to yours. Now, the hardest habit. Redirect reaction into action. While others argue, you build. While they gossip, you grow. While they obsess, you ascend. This is how you turn conflict into fuel. The best revenge is not survival, it's transformation. Make progress your weapon. Publish the work, refine your craft, keep producing excellence. Each new success makes the attack look smaller. Your focus becomes humiliation for those who tried to distract you. Then comes guarding your circle. Power attracts parasites, people who feed on access, not alignment. Audit your surroundings often. Silence the noisy, distance the jealous, limit the talkative. Keep people who think strategically, move quietly, and bring clarity, not chaos. A disciplined environment protects your mind from contamination. The fewer people who know your plans, the stronger they become. Privacy is leverage. Next, master the art of disappearing. When something no longer serves you, a group, a friendship, a fight, leave without drama. No closure, no announcements. Just disappearance. True ending don't need noise. Disappearing with grace does two things. It denies closure to the attacker and transforms your absence into mystery. They'll replay your silence like a riddle. Let them. Every minute they spend wondering is proof of your power. Finally, kill the ego daily. The ego wants to be seen, to be right, to be loud. It's the voice that says, defend yourself and show them. The more you feed it, the weaker you become. Ego is a leash. Let it die. You don't need to prove you're right. You need to be right. You don't need to be praised. You need to keep winning. Every time you choose silence over reaction, patience over pride, progress over validation, you bury the ego and resurrect power. When you combine these disciplines, you become something rare, untouchable. Emotional neutrality makes you unreadable. Silence makes you unpredictable. Controlled visibility makes you unforgettable. Detachment makes you unmanipulable. Composure makes you magnetic. Frame control makes you dominant. Progress makes you inevitable. Ego death makes you immortal. That's the final evolution. You no longer fight for control. You are control. People will sense it. Rooms will quiet when you speak. Enemies will hesitate before mentioning your name. Because they'll realize you don't play their game, you redefine the field. And when conflict comes, and it will, you won't need to destroy anyone. You'll let their obsession consume them while you keep building. Your silence will do the talking. Your results will do the damage. They'll try to pull you down, but there will be nothing left to grab, because you've moved too high, too quiet, too far. That's the Machiavellian way. Not through force, not through revenge, but through transformation so complete that your very existence exposes their weakness. No blood, no battle, no noise, just the quiet, devastating power of someone who can't be reached.